Hey guys, welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. How are you doing? Remember, this is a place where we examine everything under the microscope of logic to ascertain what is most factual and logically consistent. So, one of the biggest topics that's currently causing a buzz is Tucker Carlson's interview of Mike Huckabee, who is, the United States ambassador to the state of Israel, which seems to have its thumb around US politicians, just playing them like a fiddle. So this interview was very, very revealing. It's revealing of the fact that Tucker Carlson can be quite an effective journalist when he wants to be. He has the ability and the skills to bring out certain things in people, right? Except in occasions where he just wants to give softball interviews like the one he did with Vladimir Putin, who he obviously admires, and with Nick Fuentes as well. But with someone like Michael Huckabee, with someone like Ted Cruz, he's been quite effective. It was very, he asked difficult questions, he asked the tough questions, was hard hitting, and it was revealing. It just shows how much beholden to the state of Israel that these politicians are. Now, I watched this before the stream, so I have an idea where this is going. This conversation is going to go. What it seems to me is this man wouldn't reveal anything substantive. He would either say, I don't know. Most of his answers to the questions were, I don't know. While this was the same man that asked Tucker Carlson to talk to him about Israel. And then when he gets the opportunity to have that conversation, he's unable to answer basic questions. It's insane, right? But let's just go into it and see how Tucker Carlson handles this interview masterfully.
I hope it's informative. Ambassador, thank you very much for having us, for inviting me. I was grateful to be invited.
Well, thank you.
I was grateful because I don't like all the name calling. I've engaged in some of it. I want to apologize for that. In general, I don't think people should be going immediately to motive, calling each other Nazis or anti-Semites. I said I hate the Christian Zionists. I lost control of myself. Of course, I don't. I've apologized for that. I have problems with my anger, and so I just want to apologize to you since you are a Christian Zionist.
You and I have known each other for over 30 years.
Over 30 years. That is totally true.
So see what Tucker Carlson is doing here. He's trying to build rapport, which is good. Sets the conversation in a very friendly tone. Over the internet, there's a lot of, rhetoric. There's a lot of emotions that come into topics that you might say something that may seem offensive to another person that you wouldn't really say to their face. That's one of the dangers of social media. People are able to say things to other people over the internet without consequences. These are things that they would normally not say to the person's face. So Tucker Carlson is trying to, create a very cordial tone for the interview. Now, this tone is not going to be maintained throughout, but at least it makes the person open and welcome, puts their guard down, and they're able to ease into the conversation. But as the conversation starts, he starts to mount the pressure on Mike Huckabee, who, as you would see, was not up to the task.
When you were in Little Rock. So
yes, the newspaper.
It's why I wanted us to have a conversation, talk to each other and not about each other. And I appreciate very much your coming here to.
Of course. And I'm only staying a couple hours, unfortunately, because I kind of shoehorned this in, but I hope that I will be back soon. And I hope that I can come back soon because I actually like, despite what you may hear, I actually like the country. I've been here a lot, and there are a lot of things I love about it. And I want to talk to people in it for like a week.
Good.
And get a better sense of it. So I want to ask you, everyone I've talked to in preparation for this has said the same thing. Jonathan Pollard, I'm just going to throw the name to you and have you explain.
No, I'm glad you asked.
Of course.
Interestingly, there's been a lot of things about it. You're the first person who has asked me about it, which I
feel right off. Tucker Carlson, after that easing into the conversation, goes straight for the jugular, right? So there is this Israeli spy who was an American citizen who took state secrets from the US and gave them to Israel. He was apprehended. He was tried, convicted, and he spent time in prison in the US. And then He went to Israel, where he was welcomed as a hero. He was celebrated, so on and so forth. That guy met Mike Huckabee, I think, in the U.S. Embassy. And Tucker Carlson is asking, why would a U.S. ambassador be meeting with a traitor to the U.S., someone who is an ex-convict, someone who did something treasonous? Why would you be meeting with such a person, no less, in the U.S. Embassy? What was that about? So this is what he's trying to clarify now.
Find amazing. So I'm glad you did.
Really?
Yeah, the very first.
Good. Well, it's better to hear it.
Sure. I met Jonathan Pollard 2 times. Once I was making a speech in Jerusalem. This has been a few years ago. His wife was still alive at the time, and he was there. And someone introduced me to him and his wife. I said hello to them. That was it. Hi. Nice to meet Esther, his wife. And that was it. I went and made my speech and I left.
This reminds me of that Lutnick guy, the guy who said he only met Epstein once, and that from the 10 or 5 steps it took him and his wife to move from Epstein's apartment to his own apartment, him and his wife vowed to never be in the company of Epstein again. And then these emails showed that this guy, after such a vow, literally went to Epstein's island on multiple occasions. That's the kind of vibe this is giving me. You just met a guy for the first time during a conversation, doing something, an event at Jerusalem, and then the next time you're meeting him, you're inviting him to the U.S. Embassy. It just seems a little bit weird.
Later, his wife passed away here in Israel. And I sent him a note and just said, I'm sorry to hear about your wife. I remember meeting her at the hotel, and sorry to hear it. He then...
For someone you just met once, how were you even able to know that this guy's wife had passed? How did you have his contact to be able to send him a note? It seemed there is more to this relationship than you are letting on.
And asked, could he come and see me? He wanted to come and thank me for being kind to him.
Really? So of all the people, I'm sure there are lots of people that would have, they would have commiserated with him over the passing of his wife. Was it how he thanked them? Going to see them personally. He couldn't just say thank you over the phone, send a note just as you had sent. He needed to see you in person. Could it be that he was fishing for more information? This guy's a traitor anyway. Could it be that you, being the ambassador to Israel from the US, a country which this guy has spied on before, could it be that he wanted to get some information from you? Who knows? Maybe he brought a spy equipment into the embassy. I mean, former CIA agents have said that every time the Israelis come to the US, they are always, without fail, every time they're always trying to bug the US. They're trying to planting listening and spy devices everywhere. So how do you let that kind of guy get so close to you?
He came to the embassy. I think we met for maybe 30 minutes. We had a nice, pleasant visit. The funny thing was the New York Times reported that it was a secret meeting. Tucker, if you've ever been to the U.S. Embassy, you would know there's no such thing as a secret meeting at the U.S. Embassy.
Sure.
There are cameras everywhere. You walk through Marines, you walk through security, you walk through the front office, and there's a dozen or more people that are going to check you out when you come. And before you get there, you're going to have to give us your passport.
Someone coming into the embassy for a secret meeting does not mean the person wouldn't have to go through all that. It doesn't mean they're going to disappear. All those things can be arranged. Yeah, he could come in, but the conversation is private. The conversation is confidential. Don't you have confidential meetings in the U.S. Embassy? Do all the Marines doing all the checks, do they know about what is going on in these meetings?
Information, you're going to have to be vetted and screened and all of this stuff. So the idea that it was secret was ludicrous. The whole idea is, look, Jonathan Pollard did something that was terribly wrong. He sold secrets. He shouldn't have done it. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison and spent 30, actually was, I think he was sentenced to maybe more than 30 years, but he spent 30 years in prison. Most people convicted of something similar, which was one count, I believe, would have spent 2 to 4, but he spent 30. I don't have a problem with him spending 30. because I think what he did was despicable. I'm not defending anything about what he did. But even people like the former director of the CIA, a number of other senators on the Senate Foreign Relations of the Senate Intel Committee said that he should be allowed to leave and move to Israel if he wanted to. So it, to me, was not as big a deal that I had this basically courtesy meeting. He wanted to thank me for being nice to him when his wife died. That's pretty much the story.
You advocated for his release when you ran for, I remember it, in 2011, long before he had served 30 years.
You advocated for his release. So how would you advocate for the release of someone you just met once? You see why his story is not clicking. Nah, it's not clicking. You're advocating for the early release of a traitor, of a treasonous person.
And I agree with you that there are a lot of people languishing in prison, in our country and in this country, in many countries, for longer periods than they deserve. And I think it's a Christian impulse to want to see them free. But this was the greatest traitor in modern American history who sold our battle plans against the Soviet Union, our main enemy in the Cold War, to the Israeli government, which according to our Reagan CIA director, Bill Casey, then gave them to the Soviet Union. So this was the most profound betrayal of the United States in my lifetime. Why advocate for that guy's release before he serves his full sentence?
Baby, give me 7 weeks, and I promise you that your voice will shock you. The Vocal Star Academy is...
If that were the case in 2011, it would have been because I had a number of friends that suggested that he had more than served time, and he didn't want to live in the U.S. anymore. He wanted to live in Israel. And but my association with him, again, I had never met him until I met him in Jerusalem at a hotel.
You don't get to decide where you want to live in when you are in prison. You don't get to decide that. That's not even a factor that should even come into play. This guy was in prison, he was in jail. So his desire to want to get the hell out of the US is of no consequence. It's not a reason to advocate for his early release. So it's...
Oh, that was the first time I had ever encountered him.
I'm friends with a million bad people, or I've talked to a million bad people.
I'm sitting here with you. I mean, come on.
Jesus ain't with tax collectors. So trust me, do not judge people who are friends or know or enjoy the company of immoral people, because it's not an endorsement of their immoral behavior. Pollard is different. I think once you become U.S. ambassador, the representative of the president of the United States in the United States of America in a foreign country, and then you invite not only the most damaging betrayer in our lifetimes, but also a guy who continues to advocate for betrayal. So he gave an interview, as I know you know, in 2021 to Israeli media, in which he said, I would encourage Jewish Americans with security clearances to spy for Mossad against their own country, the United States, because, and I'm pretty much quoting him, all Jews should have dual loyalty.
I mean, I have found out that the biggest anti-Semites, people who are playing into every anti-Semitic trope that you could ever think of, are Zionists. They lean into it without shame. I mean, isn't this what Adolf Hitler complained about? Isn't this what the Nazis were complaining about? That Jews don't have loyalty to Germany, that they have dual loyalties, that they are going to betray the country, that they betrayed Germany in World War I. That was part of the whole gripe that the Nazis had with Jews. And to think that after that atrocity, more than 70 years down the line, a Jewish person is saying, you know what? Adolf Hitler was right. We Jews should have dual loyalty. We should spy on the countries that we're from on behalf of Israel, simply because we're Jews. It should be our duty. Do you know how insane that is? If anyone who is not Jewish says something like that, it comes off as being anti-Semitic, because you are playing into that trope that Jews are betrayal to their countries, they have dual loyalties. But this is an Israeli, this is a Zionist saying the exact same thing. and being praised for it.
That's not repentance. That's not someone who feels bad about what he did. That's someone who's encouraging American Jews to betray their country. That's pretty heavy, don't you think?
Oh, I do. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think, let's remember, it was President Trump who probably facilitated his departure. And I'm certainly supportive of President Trump. I think you are. And
Pollard's not. He called him a madman after your meeting.
That's why I say Pollard is not, for me, the real issue. It was the fact that he did something that was despicable. I'm not denying that. Of course he did. And he paid dearly for it, 30 years in prison, and he should have. That's what he should have done. There's no question about that.
But why meet with him in the U.S. Embassy? Your colleagues said they were shocked. They said...
Who were the colleagues that said they were shocked?
Quoted on Background in the New York Times. I think the meeting was in August. I mean, this could all be fake. That's why I'm asking you.
Well, the same New York Times said it was a secret meeting. And I'm telling you, there's no such thing as a secret meeting in the U.S. Embassy.
Do you see why the U.S. ambassador hosting a convicted betrayer of his own country who's encouraging Americans to continue to betray their country would seem shocking?
Well, I would say that it wasn't that you make it sound like I'm hosting a meeting. I simply...
It is irrelevant whether you're hosting, quote unquote, an official meeting. You met with an ex-convict, not just any other ex-convict, a treasonous ex-convict, someone who stole information, who took classified information that could compromise the security of your country, and gave it to another country. He was found guilty. He did his time, and you met him in the embassy of the United States. Do you know how crazy that sounds? And you met him in a very jovial, friendly manner, which means that there's certainly more to the relationship than you're letting on.
Met with him. I meet with people all the time.
Some can just walk in without a...
No, they have to have an appointment. Of course they do.
Oh, so there was an appointment. So it wasn't just a random thing. He didn't just waltz in. There was an arrangement for him to come see you.
It is hosting him then, I think.
Well, I don't know if it was hosting, but it was certainly, he was able to come to the U.S. Embassy to have a meeting at his request.
How is an ex-convict able to come to a U.S. Embassy at his own request? How does that work? Can any criminal in the U.S. now, in jail, having been released from jail, can they just make a request to the U.S. Embassy and just waltz in and have a meeting with the U.S. ambassador? How does that work?
I did. And frankly, I don't regret it. I met with a lot of people over the...
Of course you don't.
Course of the time I've been here, and we'll meet with a lot more.
First, let's talk about the elephant in the room. These days, the average watch time for a video is just...
That's it.
So if you spend the evening at my house, you are guaranteed to find yourself in a...
There have been Americans in prison in Israel. There have also been, and there continue to be, dozens and dozens and dozens of accused sex offenders from the United States who fled to Israel.
So at this point, Tucker Carlson is tasking him on something else, which is the fact that many sex offenders, alleged sex offenders, who are Israelis, who have dual citizenship, having committed sex offenses in the US, are able to simply run to Israel and they're shielded. They don't face the consequences of their actions. Israel is essentially shielding sex offenders. And so Tucker is taking into task on this.
Including one recently, an Israeli government official who was caught trying to molest a 15-year-old girl and fled to Israel and is not going back to the United States to stand charges for attempted molestation of a child. Have you advocated for the Israeli government to return him to the United States?
I'm not familiar with that case. It has not come to us at the embassy. So
Really? You're not familiar with that very popular case that everyone was talking about? Really? The US ambassador to Israel doesn't know that an Israeli citizen did such a thing in the US and then ran back to Israel? I mean, you should really begin to question the competency of this guy who doesn't seem to know anything that's happening between his country and the country he's supposed to be an ambassador to.
Not aware. Is this the person in Nevada?
That is correct.
Okay, I
In
heard
Clark
about
County, I would imagine so.
Yeah, I heard about it, but I heard about it through open source media. It was never something that was presented to us, but I would have no problem with him being extradited back to the U.S.
You're the president's and our country's representative in the state of Israel. So I think it would fall to you to advocate with your friend, the prime minister, to say, wait a second, we have a very close relationship. We're obviously the single largest source of outside funding for this country. How can you take an accused child molester and shield him from American justice, send him back to the United States? Have you ever had that conversation?
No, because the prime minister would not be the proper person
that may be
in
right.
Israel.
Pardon my ignorance. But
that would deal with an extradition. It would go through their court system. And so the prime minister is separate, very similar to what we have in the U.S., where there is a separation of powers. So it would go through something other than the prime minister.
Have you advocated to the courts, to judges, to anybody in the Israeli justice system?
There has never been a request for me to engage in that. I would be happy to do it if the White House sent a message to me. I do work for the president. I serve at his pleasure. If anyone at the White House were to say to me, would you please go and make a case for it? But probably if that were to happen, it wouldn't come through the embassy as much as it would likely come from the Department of Justice at the U.S. in D.C. They would make the request. They might involve us, but they very likely would not.
Okay,
Does it seem strange?
So you in your official capacity, it's not really a requirement for you to do something like that. However, was it also in your capacity to be asking for leniency for a man who betrayed the U.S.? On what grounds were you asking for him to be released early?
To you that people accuse
you cannot on your own initiate the pursuit of sex offenders, but you can on your own initiate, a conversation on the release of a treasonous person. How does that work? This is supposed to be the law and order party, shielding criminals.
Accused of child molestation in the United States are allowed to have refuge within the borders of our closest ally? How that doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I would say that
if you've molested an American child, shouldn't you be required to stand justice?
It's an allegation. Let's be clear. One of the things about our system of jurisprudence, you're innocent until you're proven guilty beyond a reason.
Yeah, but that was never allowed. The law was never allowed to take its course because these guys ran away. So if they weren't guilty, they should have stayed back, gone through all the process, and be acquitted. And nobody would be having this conversation. Wouldn't be necessary. It would be a moot conversation if that had happened. But the fact that they did not allow due process to take its course by running away, that's why these suspicions are there. Just for the fact that someone has not been sentenced, when someone is credibly accused or indicted of a crime, their status is in question. Their status is in question. They are neither here nor there. So it has to be resolved in one direction, guilty or not guilty. As long as that hasn't happened, you can't blame people for assuming the worst.
Reasonable doubt. So if the charges are there, should he be extradited? I would say so.
The charges are there.
Yeah. Okay. So they should be, but that's a Justice Department decision, and they're the ones who should be pursuing it. To my knowledge, they haven't. They certainly haven't engaged the U.S. Embassy over.
Why would the Israeli government harbor fugitives from justice in the United States?
I'm not sure that
there are dozens and dozens and dozens. And in fact, there's an Israeli group that keeps track of them that is dedicated, Jewish Israeli group dedicated to combating the molestation of children, and keeps a long list. And you can look it up. And
Tucker, I hope you're not saying that you think the Israelis.
So this is why I really hate the idea of stereotyping any group of people. As much as you want to tackle the Israelis of how terrible they are, it's not all Israelis. I mean, there are people in Israel who are aware of something like this, and they are creating the awareness about it, that this is happening, it shouldn't be happening. The people in Israel who, made known, for example, Haaretz, made known the atrocities that the Israeli government was committing against the Palestinians in Gaza. So it's really why I don't like collective punishment, because I think no matter how terrible, quote unquote a group of people are, they are not a monolith. They are always going to be different people. You find the good, the bad, the ugly in any group of people. Anywhere they are, you would always find that. So it's a bad thing to stereotype everybody in a particular country or in a particular place or any identity. See, this is what they are, because that's not the case. Because if that were the case, then there would be no Israelis speaking against this. They would all fall in line. It is that is what Pollard was calling for all Israelis to fall in line with this particular ideology. You must spy on the behalf of Israel. You must be loyal to Israel wherever you are, which does massive damage to the reputation of Jews, because it creates that impression that, can you really trust these people? So even though you want to treat people just, there's always this, there's this thing in the back of your mind, can I really trust this person?
Support the molestation of children.
Obviously, I'm not saying that.
Okay,
I'm saying that the Israeli government shields accused child molesters from justice in the United States.
I'm not sure I could say that that's something that is provable. I don't know. But I am not aware that the Israeli government is shielding people.
You obviously want to sleep well and fashionably. Brooklyn bedding can
read it. But yes, he is an Israeli, I believe, cybersecurity official who was at a conference in Las Vegas last year and was caught up in a sting designed to catch people soliciting sex from children. He was one of a number of people arrested for this. He was arraigned and charged. And then 2 days later, he fled to Israel.
I really don't understand people who are attracted to minors. What the hell is going on with them? I mean, if you want to have sex or you want to have affairs and all, you can't look for an adult woman. Why do you have to go to children? What's really going on in your head?
And did his first hearing by Zoom. He was allowed for some reason to leave for a foreign country, having already been charged for a attempted molestation of a child.
And I am very certain that his leaving was facilitated by the Israeli government. So Tucker is right when he says the Israeli government is shielding sex offenders.
And he remains here now. And there have been many news stories about this. And I just wonder if you would ask the Israeli government to put him on a plane and send him back to face justice for attempting to molest an American child. It doesn't seem complicated.
No, I wouldn't mind doing that, but I want to find out if the Justice Department of the U.S. has already sought to extradite him. Is there anything in process? I don't know.
Why wouldn't they seek to extradite him?
I have no idea. That's a question for the Justice Department.
I have many questions for the Justice Department, like why are millions of Epstein files still classified? Why do you think that is?
I have no idea. I haven't kept up with that. I've never met the man. I don't know him.
You haven't kept up with the Epstein disclosure?
I mean, only from a distance. I'm 6,000 miles away from D.C. these days.
You attacked me personally for suggesting that Jeffrey Epstein had ties to Mossad. I'm not saying he worked for Mossad. I don't think we know that. But there's no question that he had extensive contact with CIA.
But I think you said it, a turning point event. Everybody knows Jeffrey Epstein.
I said everyone thinks. And it turns out everyone was right, that he did have.
I'm not sure everyone was right or everyone thinks.
Okay, but you said that I was lying, and I don't want to make this about me.
I don't think I said you were lying, Tucker. I don't recall.
I'm just saying, why don't we release all the files, and then we don't need to guess?
I got no problem with that. Go ahead.
Would you call on it? Well, because you weighed in on it and said that this was not true, when of course...
I said there was no evidence.
Well, there's quite a bit of evidence, but you haven't apparently bothered to read any of the files. Is that what you're saying?
I have not read the Epstein files. Apparently you have.
Well, they're on the internet.
But when you say that
apparently there is no internet in Israel, so he can't access those files. He cannot access the files that he made, some judgment calls on, to saying that there is no evidence. There's no evidence that Epstein had any. On what basis was he making that statement? There's no evidence that Epstein had any connection with the Mossad. But then the evidence has come out now, and he doesn't even bother to check. Maybe his claim was correct. He just assumes. This guy The number of times he said, I don't know, calls into question his competence. You don't know? This is the hottest thing that's happening between your country and Israel at this point in time. And you don't know as the ambassador. You don't know. Mind you, you were the one who's called for this interview. And you obviously don't know anything. It's mind-blowing.
Everybody knows that Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent.
Said everyone believes that.
I don't think everybody does. I don't know.
Well, everyone knows that he had.
You know what? This is a semantic, they've turned it into some semantic debates. Everybody, of course, it's not everybody, if that's what he's harping on. Some people, many people, and there is credible evidence to suggest that people who think so are right. Of course, everybody cannot, in a literal sense, believe something.
Contact with, and by the way, not just Israeli intelligence, American intelligence, which is much more distressing for me. I'm not Israeli, I'm American. I don't want my government having any contact with someone like Jeffrey Epstein. So the shame
I wouldn't either.
Is on the United States, as far as I'm concerned, just to be totally clear about that. Everyone's very sensitive about the Israel connection, not at all sensitive about the US connection, which I find very revealing. We should care about what our government does first, I think. But since you weighed in on it and said there's no evidence, I'm surprised that since that evidence has been open to the public for a month, since you've already weighed in publicly on this question, that you've made no effort to evaluate that evidence. Why is that?
I just told you, I was certainly not aware that there were some specific allegations. I knew about the former prime minister, but I don't know him. Not sure I ever met him in my many times. I've been to Israel over 100 times since 1973. The first time I came here was 1973, July. And it's almost 53 years of coming and going to this country. So I know the country well. I know a lot of people here, but I don't know everything and I don't know everybody, but I do know a lot of people.
Of course, no.
You know a lot of people, you don't know everything, you don't know everything, but conveniently, the things that are most important are the things that you don't know. Very convenient.
And I can see your love for it, and I think that's great. But I'm talking about the U.S. government and its responsibility to, there's a lot of complaint about conspiracy theories and everyone, he's a hater. Everyone's assigning motive. But there's a way to end these conversations very quickly with facts. And I'm highly confused by.
Have you brought this up to the president?
No, I don't work for him. I've said this many times.
I know you don't work for him, but you
exactly. You work for him. Have you brought it up with him?
You go to the White House and you see people there. You and J.D. Vance are very good friends. So have you brought this up to them? Because
I have brought this up in public many times.
It's not on my portfolio, but apparently it's very strongly on your mind. And I'm
child molestation
you should
is a significant concern for me.
Well, it should be for everybody. But if
there is a charged child molester.
But I'm saying if you are very involved in the details of this,
I'm not.
And you think it's the U.S. government that's hiding and shielding somebody, then bring it up to the people that you personally know.
I don't think that. I know it because the Justice Department has said we have millions of documents we're not releasing.
Why are they not releasing them?
I'm asking you as a U.S. government official.
Well, but
what the answer?
A government official at the embassy in Jerusalem that has not one thing to do with the Justice Department and what they're investigating on any given day.
Again,
unless it involves.
And I don't want to argue or talk in circles, but you were the one who brought it up and said it's absolutely not true.
I was only responding to what I heard you say.
Okay, but now that you know there's evidence and we can settle.
Tucker is not letting this go. Tucker is not going to let this go.
This debate, you haven't looked at the evidence and you're not pushing for the release of the total corpus of evidence. And I'm confused because I want to believe that your goal is to get to the truth. And the fastest way to do that is by releasing the evidence. Don't you think?
You suggest that I can release the evidence?
I'm suggesting that you could call for it right now.
Well, fine, call for it. Let's have it all open. I thought it was being all opened up for everything I know.
Once it's open, I hope you'll read it because it's really interesting. And then it puts to rest a lot of the debate and it ends the name calling because we can say, here it is right there. And we don't.
He's not going to read it. He hasn't even read the ones that have been released yet.
Don't have to call people names. We can just assess the documents. Let me ask you.
But you bring it up. I hope you will bring it up to people at the White House. That
I'm bringing it up right now. I'm bringing it up now, and I'm asking. I just want to say this one last time. As the U.S. ambassador to Israel, I hope that you will make a formal request to the Israeli government to send every accused sex offender in this country back to the United States to face justice. And I don't understand why that hasn't been done. I'm confused.
Well, we'll try to clear up all the confusion that we have.
Well, if someone's been accused of trying to molest a child, I think it's...
Then certainly, and I'll check with the Justice Department because it is a DOJ issue and it would be handled through DOJ, the U.S., to the court systems in Israel. That's how it would be handled.
But the first step is the Israeli government saying, yes, we will allow you to extradite this person back. The person is being shielded by the government. That's why the person's here. That's why he fled here, so he wouldn't have to stand trial for trying to molest a child. I want to get to as I said at the outset, I said something awful that I regret that my wife barked at me about. I lashed out at Christian Zionists and evangelicals, and I just want to say again that I'm sorry. I've always liked them because they're pro-life and they're also really nice people. So for the third time, I'm sorry that I said that. I think part of...
This guy is really good. After chewing him up, he's apologizing again because he wants to get into something nasty again. So he's trying to wet the ground, trying to create another cordial tone before going into the next round and bout.
My problem was I don't understand the theology, and you are not a fake Baptist minister. You're an actual minister. You had a church for many years. You're an actual theologian. So, and I mean this with sincerity, I hear people say, those who bless Israel will be blessed. I know it's a reference to Genesis. I don't understand the connection between that concept and modern Israel and the geopolitical world. And so I'm going to stand back and ask
let's first define, because, for my days as a debater in high school and college, one of the things I knew, you didn't start the debate till you defined the terms.
Amen.
Let's define the terms.
Thank you.
What is a Christian Zionist? What does that mean to you?
Me. A Christian Zionist is an idolater. You can't be a Christian and a Zionist. Those two things don't go together. It makes no sense, right? What is Zionism? It's a political ideology. A political ideology that has nothing to do with Christianity. There is no theology associated with this in any sense. So if you want to say Zionism is the fight for the Jews to have a homeland, well, that's good and fine. That has nothing to do with Christianity. It really has nothing to do with Christianity. It should not even be associated in any sense, in any way. In any sense. You could be a Christian and be a Zionist, yeah, but that compound word, Christian Zionist, you're putting the Christian faith in the center of that political ideology, which doesn't track, it doesn't follow.
What does it mean?
I don't know. It's the people who call me a Nazi for asking what Israel means. I mean, that's kind of I don't even know.
But here's the point. If you say a Christian Zionist is a person who has a brain virus and is guilty of heresy, that's
actually they are guilty of heresy. Because literally you are making, if you want to take it to the religious sense about Judaism, you are advocating for another religion. Christianity is the one true religion. So you don't, as a Christian, advocate for any other religion. You don't advocate for Islam. You don't advocate for Hinduism. You don't advocate for Judaism. None. If you do that, it's literal Christian heresy, which is what these Christian Zionists are doing, advocating for another religion.
Pretty big charge.
I know. I shouldn't have made it. I made it out of anger and ignorance.
So,
and I'm
Christian, I think we can agree, as somebody who follows Jesus Christ.
Exactly.
Has a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, believes in his death, burial, resurrection.
And do the Jews believe in any of that? Do they believe in Jesus Christ in a religious sense? Do they believe in his death and resurrection? No. I mean, There was this clip I saw of Epstein, which was really telling about how Jews view Christ. Now, you might not be a Christian, but in an historical sense, you have to admit that this is one of the greatest men that ever lived. So even if you don't believe in his theology, you have to just admit that. There was something that was asked to Epstein in one interview, and Christ was brought up, and the dismissiveness, the demeaning way in which he talked about just shows you that they have absolutely no respect. This is on a religious sense. I'm talking about Judaism as a religion. Have no respect whatsoever for Jesus Christ. And as someone who is a follower of Christ, that should not be acceptable to you. You shouldn't be advocating for people who think that Christ was a traitor, that Christ was a charlatan, was a false prophet, was all those things, that he's burning in hell in physics and so on and so forth. That's a literal heresy.
Has repented of one's sins and have accepted him as one savior. Would that be fair?
Amen.
Christian. Define that. Zionist. A Zionist simply means a person who believes that the Jewish people have a right to have a homeland where they have security and safety.
But what does that have to do with Christianity? I really don't understand specifically why Christians have to advocate specifically for Jewish people to have a homeland. Is that a similar requirement for other religions? Do Christians have the right to a homeland? Do Muslims have a right to a homeland? Do Hindus have a right to a homeland? I don't think so. I think people have a right to a homeland. People shouldn't have the right to a homeland based on their religion. With the way the world is set up, the way the world has always been set up, different people of different faiths have always lived within the same environment. And though there have been clashes, but that's just the way it's always been. So for you to say that it's a right that people of a particular religious affiliation should have a homeland dedicated to them, no less in a land that also harbors people of other religious faith, which will entail you committing ethnic cleansing for you to achieve that. I mean, Zionism was literally built on ethnic cleansing, because the land that you say that the Jews have a right to, when they got there were other people living there. There were Jews living there, there were Palestinian Arabs living there, there were Christians, there were Samaritans, there were other people living there. But that land has to be exclusively for Jews, so everyone else has to get the hell out. And that's something you're supposed to support? Doesn't make any sense. If it was some virgin land that nobody was living on, yeah, good and fine. You could have it as much as you want. But to create a country on a land that is multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and to make it exclusively for one ethnic and religious group, it's insane. No Christian should have to support something like that.
Did you believe that the Jews have a right to live in Israel? Do you believe that Jews have a right to live in Israel? That would be a Zionist. That's all a Zionist is.
I have a million questions about what all of those terms mean.
Yeah.
But conceptually, I wish Israel no harm. I don't want to see them.
You want them to have a place where they can live with safety and security?
So I saw this recently in an extremely telling exchange between the lieutenant governor of Texas, who I know and I've always liked, and a woman I don't know, never met, who's on the Religious Liberty Commission or something. And she said, I'm a Catholic, but I'm not a Zionist. And they had this ferocious exchange. And he kept saying, and everyone on the panel seemed to keep saying, you have to believe in Israel's right to exist. Which I've never kind of questioned, just for the record.
Why is it a prerequisite for you to believe in Israel to exist as a Christian? Why is it a prerequisite? Christianity and Judaism are not the same religion. Yeah, they have similar roots. They are by no means the same religion. They don't teach the same things. They don't believe the same things. Of course, there are always going to be similarities. There are also similarities with Islam. Doesn't mean Christianity and Islam are the same religion. The three religions have similar roots. It doesn't mean they're the same. So why should it be a prerequisite for a Christian to be a Zionist?
But it did raise two questions I think are really important, and I hope you'll answer them. One is, where does that right come from?
I would say it comes from, essentially, you could say.
So, before he gives his answer, let me attempt to answer this. Where does this right come from? Let's say the right comes from the Bible. God Almighty said, He's giving the land to his children, that they would inherit the land. But as a Christian, the promises given to Abraham, after the time of Jesus Christ, for you to have access to that promise is based on faith and not on lineal descent. So all who are Abraham's children by faith, of which Christians are, they are the inheritors of Abraham's promise. Now, that promise does come with a promise of a land, but not land in this world, not land in this earthly, it's land in the world to come. So by every right, it is Christians who are inheritors of that promise. Now, I'm going religious, I'm going theological, right? Apostle Paul said, not everyone is a Jew who is a Jew. That's there, and there's neither Jew nor Greek, there's neither Jew nor Gentile, there's neither male nor female, everyone has become one in Christ. So long as you believe in Jesus Christ, you are an inheritor of that promise. That promise was fulfilled in Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ made that promise, available to all people. The promise that God gave to Abraham was that his children would be as the stars of heaven. Do you think the current Jews are that many? No. So, on a religious sense, Jews don't even qualify to be inheritors of that promise because they don't believe in Christ. They don't believe in the Son of God, so they don't qualify. Now, on a secular sense, it doesn't even make sense for you to say, God gave us this land, so we have it. What are people who don't believe in your God? What are they going to say? What makes you think that the God you believe in, just because you claim that God gave you the right to this land, that other people are supposed to respect it? Why is a Muslim supposed to respect your claim? Why is a Hindu person supposed to respect your claim? Do you think I'd respect the claim of a Muslim person who says God gave them something? Do you think I respect that on the basis of God gave? Absolutely not.
It comes from the Bible. I would say that it does. But it comes also from a long iteration of historical precedents going to the Balfour Declaration of 1917. It comes from the League of Nations 1927. It comes from the United Nations 1947,
right?
The Declaration of Independence of the Israel State in May of 1948. They were immediately attacked. They won the war. They were attacked again in 1956. They won the war. They were attacked again in 1967 by 5 countries. They won the war. They were attacked again in 1973 in the Yom Kippur War. They won the war. The point is, does Israel have a right to exist? They also had wars in 1982 in Lebanon. They've had the intifadas, 2 of those. They've had
Lebanon again in 06. I was there. No, I'm very familiar with the modern history of the state.
Okay.
Pretty familiar, I think. And I've been
But
here.
a Zionist simply means somebody who believes that Israel has a right to exist. Now, the question is, do you believe Israel has a right to exist?
I guess. I mean, I want Israel to exist. Well, no, but I want to know what that means. So, like,
what does it mean to say a country has the right to exist? It simply exists. Where does this right come from? And why is it only invoked when Israel is concerned? No other country has ever invoked a right to exist. They just exist. So what if I say I don't believe Israel has the right to exist? Does that mean Israel automatically disappears? It's a silly question. It's a question that is meant to force something that isn't real. Like you're denying them something that is who gave you that right to exist as a country? People have a right to exist. People have the right to live in countries, but do countries have the right to exist? I really don't think so. I mean, there are countries that have come into existence and have gone out of existence, but the people always remain. the identities that have national identities that have changed. So what happened to the rights of those countries to exist? What happened to the right of the Soviet Union to exist? What happened to the rights of Yugoslavia and some other countries that have broken up? What happened to their right to exist? So all these, you know, Israel has a right to exist. No, people, the Jews, wherever they are, Jewish people, wherever they are, have the right to be in a state where they are protected legally, socially, and in every sense. And they certainly don't need a particular country for that.
Other countries have a right to exist?
Well, they do exist.
Do they have a right to exist? You keep saying Israel has a right to exist, and I want to know what other.
So you see him giving the proper response when Tucker asks him, do other countries have the right to exist? He never says yes. They do exist. That is it. That's the answer to the question. Israel exists. So it's a moot question to ask if Israel has the right to exist.
Other countries
They have a
right.
legal right because every international body in the last 100 years has said the Jewish people have a right
I understand
to their indigenous homeland.
My question
so that's a
is,
legal right.
What
Do
other?
they have a biblical right? I would say that yes, but you may say they don't.
I don't know. I'm actually
Okay.
sincerely interested in finding out what you mean by a biblical right. But first, to the legal right, does any other country on the planet have the same right that Israel has to exist?
Well, you could say, does Jordan have a right to exist? When it was Transjordan and the Brits came and divided up the Middle East and they gave some land to Jordanians and they gave some land to the Saudis and they gave some land to various Middle Eastern countries, and it was all carved up. And the French gave Lebanon its right to exist. Do they have a right to exist?
Do they?
Well, why not? Why
Okay.
not?
So that's my. So
Yeah.
every country.
Does the U.S. have a right to exist?
I'm asking you.
Okay, and I'm telling you, I think the U.S. has a right to exist.
Okay.
We came here, but we came there. We're
Right.
in Israel now talking. But does the U.S. have a right to exist? Does anyone question whether we have a right to exist?
I don't. Yeah, but I, of course, I'm for America. You know.
Good for you.
But so every current country on the map has the same right to exist that Israel has. Is that what you're saying?
I think what we're saying is that when a country has established itself,
I just made a $27 ebook in 2 minutes using AI. Watch how I did it so you can do it too.
and it is following international law, it has been deemed by numerous bodies that it is indigenous to its homeland, as Israel is. This is its homeland. It goes back 3,800 years to the time of Abraham. It's not that
Well, hold on. Now I'm
the
getting
Jewish
confused.
people just showed up here in 1948 and said,
They showed up there at a particular point in time. They didn't sprout from the ground in the Levant. No, that's not what happened. If you go back to biblical history, Abraham, the patriarch of not just Jewish people, also of Arab people, came from where? Or of the Chaldees, somewhere in Babylon, somewhere in modern day Iraq, or of the Chaldees, somewhere in modern day Iraq. So wouldn't it be more appropriate to say that Jewish people are from Iraq? But let's even go further. The Israelite nation was essentially born in Egypt. Jacob and his 12 sons went into Egypt as a family and came out as a nation. Wouldn't it be more appropriate then to say that the Jews and the Israelites are actually from Egypt because that's where they were born as a nation? And when they came into the land that is the land of Israel today, it wasn't a barren land. There were people there. There were people that they pushed out. They didn't totally push out all those people. They merged with those people. They intermarried with those people and essentially became one people at a point in time. The Edomites were forcibly converted to Judaism. They took on a Jewish identity sometime in their history. King Herod, during the time of Jesus Christ, was a Jew of Edomite descent. This is very well known. So what are you talking about? There are numerous peoples that have come to that land and have left. It's been a mishmash of different people. Why does this right exist exclusively to Jewish people? What about the Samaritans? What about the Arabs? What about other groups that have been on that land from many of the Palestinians even have roots predating when the Israelites came. So what about them? They don't have that right.
We're gonna have some land.
Hold on.
here.
So those are two different tracks, and I just want to make sure that we separate them so I understand each one separately.
All right.
So you're saying there's the modern legal framework, and so you said a country that abides by international law has a right to exist.
I would say that is a part of its existence.
Would the inverse be true that a country that does not abide by international law forfeits its right to exist?
Not necessarily if it has the capacity to stay and make its case known. But there have been Jewish people in this land,
okay, but that's
in this very land, for 3,800 years.
And
that's not what is in question. The fact that there's been Jewish people in that land for most of its history is not contested. Before the Jews came from the European Jews, the Ashkenazi Jews came, there were Jews living there. They've always been Jewish people living there, which puts to bed the question that these are just Jews returning home. They never left. Of course, some left, but many stayed back as well, and many of them took on other identities. Many of the Palestinians today are actually descendants from Jews that stayed back and took on the Arab identity. This Arab identity isn't really an ethnic one as much as it is a linguistic one. Because you would go to a place like Sudan, you have dark-skinned people who are referring to themselves as Arabs. Does that mean they're from Arabia? Certainly not. You go to Morocco, you go to Tunisia, and you find Berbers referring to themselves as Arabs. Does that make them Arabs? Certainly not. It's a linguistic identity. It doesn't mean that they are literally from Arabia. So the fact that the Palestinians today, many of them are identifying as Arabs, doesn't mean that they are foreign or alien to that land. Doesn't mean they're Arabs from Arabia. Of course, they are Arabs who came and mixed with the local population. The land of Israel has never been a monolith. The Jewish people have never been a monolith. There is Edomite blood, there is Moabite blood. The grandfather of King David, the grandmother of King David, Ruth, was a Moabite woman. Many people in David's army at that point in time, there were people they were not Jewish people, they were not Israelite people. So it's always been a mix. So why exclusively for Jewish people? Why this right for them?
Okay. So, but you're saying as the modern nation state with borders and a military and a Knesset and just all the kind of trappings of a modern country, all of which I support, that country every country on the planet has the same right as Israel to exist because it does exist. Is that what you're saying? I'm just trying to understand the concept here.
Well, I think what we're trying to get to is Christian Zionism, and you've taken this way off the road here.
I don't know that I have. I don't mean to. Christian Zionism is a separate thing, but I just keep hearing people say Zionism is the belief.
But that's the fundamental argument that's going on. Does Israel have a right to live in their indigenous, ancient, historical land, a land that has been affirmed throughout international organizations, a land that has direct ties to the Jewish people?
I just want to know if this is a universal principle. I guess that's what I'm getting at, because if it's not, then it's meaningless to me, because as a Christian, I believe in universal principles. Something is right for everyone or it's wrong for everyone. We don't believe in special cases.
But here's the question. If the Jews didn't have this land, would the Jews have a right to any land?
I don't know. I'm not attacking the Jews. I'm asking if this applies to every people in every nation. Does every nation have the same right to its own homeland, to its own physical land that you say Israel does?
I feel like we're in a rabbit hole here.
No, I think it's a very straightforward question.
No, but
does that right extend to other countries other than Israel?
But the most important thing that is going on in our culture right now is whether or not the people that are yelling in the streets from the river to the sea, whether that's a legitimate point of view to say that there should not be a Jewish homeland. There should not be a Jewish state.
You'll never hear me say that. I just want to know.
I know you haven't said it, but that's the argument.
It's one of the arguments going on globally. And the United States, excuse me, has a pretty narrow view, I would say, in our media culture of what's happening around the world.
Switzerland is calling you to visit. all-inclusive
Plenty of countries having this debate. Stonehenge is a lot older than the first temple in Israel. And it was built by the same people who live there now. It's the same people. And they are being pushed off their island and outnumbered by people from other places. And so in Great Britain, in Ireland.
But Israel, I think, does have an extraordinary
international law. So if, again...
Well, no, but let me finish this,
yes,
Tucker, because here's the point. We're talking about Christian Zionism. The idea that as a Christian, I believe in both the Old and the New Testament. Why wouldn't I? I'm a person of the book. There are 80 million evangelical Christians in the United States. What makes us who we are is our adherence to the scripture, our belief that the Bible, all of it, not part of it, but all of it is the word of the living God.
Yeah.
So if I believe in the Old and the New Testament, I do believe that there is a very specific call to the Jewish people that started with Abraham.
Nope. There was a specific call to the people of God, which, yes, at the time were the Israelites, and then to the Jews, and then to the Christians. There's a progression there. God did not call the Jewish people. God called a people, and there were requirements for them to be the people of God. It wasn't a given that they would just be the people of God. God called Abraham. That blessing passed down to Abraham's descendants in the person of Isaac or Israel. That's when the 10 tribes of Israel were wiped out. That passed on to the 2 remaining tribes, which essentially gave birth to the Jews. And then that passed on to Christians. So it wasn't a call to Jewish people. It was a call to God's people. And the requirement for that call now is faith, not lineal descent.
And he called them out of what is now modern day Iraq, said, come where I send you. He came. This is the land. Genesis 12:3. He says, I will bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. In Genesis 17, he looks out at the world. He says, look, and this is where I'm giving you the land.
I think
and since that time, there have been people living in this land,
right,
connected to that moment of history. So there is a historical connection that is unbroken.
You've said that, and I want to ask you.
Did you ask many of the Palestinians about, do Jews have the right to live in Israel? I mean, I've seen interviews, and they'll be like, oh, yeah, the Jews that were here before 1947, they have a right to live here because this is their land too. But those who came after then, no, get the fuck out. Now, it's hyperbolic and I don't think it's practical to say those who came after 1947 that they should leave. But I do understand that sentiment. I do understand it because Palestinians have never denied that there were no Jews on that land, that Jews have never been on that land. That's never been their claim. Their claim is that foreign people from Europe, other parts of the world, came on the guise or the identity of Judaism to take over their land. I mean, many of the English people today are probably descended from the Danish people or Norwegian people. Do you think that English people are the rightful owners of Denmark? Do you think that they could go back to Denmark today and try to create a long-lost Danish kingdom and say, you know what, our ancestors came from Denmark 2,000 years ago, so we're returning home, so all the people on Denmark right now, get the hell out? Do you think that's practical? Do you think that's going to be allowed? That's essentially what the Palestinians are feeling. They know that there were Jewish people on that land. They've always been Jewish people on that land. They're not contesting that. And they're saying those who have always been there can stay because it's their land too. But you know these ones that came from Europe, who were welcomed as refugees, who were, given safe haven, and then turning around to bite the finger that fed you. The people that welcomed you with open arms when you were in trouble. To do that to them is just despicable.
What that means a little more specifically, if that's okay. But first, let me just say that you could say the same thing of Britons who've been there in their land longer.
Is anybody trying to tell the Brits they can't live there anymore?
No, what's happening is...
But they are saying that to the Jews.
Oh, okay. But I just wonder if you would extend the same sympathy or the same principle. You seem like this is, you think I'm trying to trap you. I'm not. I'm at all trying to trap you. It'd be as simple as saying, native Britons have
I
the
got
same
no problem with the native Brits having their land.
having the
But
right
my
to
point
their
is, I
land.
don't know
And
that there is
so-
a biblical connection for the Brits.
Okay.
But I would say,
so that's what it comes
take
down
that
to.
off the table. And I think there's still a basis for the Jews having this little bitty strip of real estate.
I'm not even arguing with you. I'm just trying to, at all. I'm just trying to understand what it is that you're saying, because it's not obvious to me. And maybe it's an IQ problem, but I'm having trouble understanding this. But let me just go back to just clarify one thing.
Okay.
You've brought up international law at least twice, maybe three times, as a basis for Israel's legitimacy. If Israel was out of compliance with international law, whatever that is, would it be less legitimate?
Depends on if the law and the way it's applied is legitimate. There are some applications of so-called international law that are not legitimate.
I agree.
Look at the ICC or the ICJ.
I agree.
Utterly ridiculous. One of the reasons I'm so grateful President Trump and Secretary Rubio are pushing hard, trying to get rid of the ICC and the ICJ, is because they have become rogue organizations that are no longer really about an equal application of law and
Rogue organizations because they're trying to hold Israel accountable. Yeah.
I don't know enough about it to say if that's true or not.
But when they were persecuting African leaders, they were not rogue organizations. It just so happens that it's when Israel was committing a genocide and they put out a warrant for the arrest of a genocidal leader, that's when they lost all their legitimacy. Very convenient.
But I'm interested that you yourself appealed to international law as a basis of Israel's
Well, what I'm looking
legitimacy.
at is the whole of the last 100 years.
The Balfour Declaration is not exactly international law, by the way. It was a letter, I think.
It was maybe not law, but it was a declaration. It was an assumption and a declaration that was done by Lord Balfour in Great Britain. At that time, this land was under the British mandate. And he said the Jews should have the land that was theirs from 3,800 years ago. It was simple as that.
Right. And I'm not debating that. I'm just, it was not international law. It was a colonial power saying, okay,
but then
here's how
later
we're
it
going to
was
divide up the
international
world
law
after
under the League of
fall
Nations,
Ottoman
under the
Empire.
United Nations. And then because of the victories that Israel had against those who tried to annihilate them, and it wasn't just that they were trying to take a little piece of their land, they tried to annihilate them.
Okay.
And there is still to this day the shouts of from the river to the sea. And Tucker, that means only one thing, not the shrinking of Israel, but the annihilation of Israel.
I don't think
that's different.
I don't think you can say that you know what it means, actually, because you don't know what's in people's hearts. So why don't we just deal with the facts? Maybe some people mean it.
I know it's in their
that.
mouths. I know it's in their minds.
But I'm not, look, you'll never hear me say that. What you will hear me say is I'm confused by what the definitions are. So let's go through this. You've appealed to Genesis. Genesis 15 says it's Abram, it's pre-Abraham, it's Abram, receives from God the news that his descendants will inherit the land. And you tell me as the theologian if I'm getting this wrong, but from the Euphrates to the Nile. I think that's right.
So I think Tucker is about to make a very, very important observation.
And that would include basically the entire Middle East. That would be the Levant. So that would be Israel, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. It would also be big parts of Saudi Arabia and Iraq. It would be,
I'm not sure it would go that far. I mean, it would be a big.
Why not? If God gave them the land from the Euphrates to the Nile, why stop at it? Why are you restricting God's promise? If the basis for Israel claiming that land is God's promise, and God said, you are going to have this land from the Euphrates to the Nile, why are you restricting it? Why not take everything?
Big piece of land, but here's the point.
It would be a lot of places that are now countries.
So welcome officially to Colossal Labs. This is the most advanced genetics lab.
But this particular area that we're talking about now, Israel, is a land that God gave through Abraham to a people that he chose. It was a people, a place, and a purpose. We can look at it that way. Christian Zionism, I want to go back because that's where we started.
I'm not going to let you off on this because you have said it 3 times that God gave this land to this people. And so it is entirely fair for me with respect to ask, what land are you talking about? Because I just read Genesis 15, as I have many times.
Mm-hmm.
And that land, I think it says, from the Nile to the Euphrates, which is, once again, basically the entire Middle East. So God gave that land to his people, the Jews, or he didn't. You're saying he did. What does that mean? Does Israel have the right to that land? Because you're appealing to Genesis.
Yeah.
You're saying that's the original deed.
It would be fine if they took it all.
So this is the most honest thing this guy has said all day. It'll be fine if they took it all. And this is exactly the, inclinations of Israel. They're not going to stop at Gaza. They're not going to stop at the West Bank. The expansionists, they've never defined their borders. Never. They've taken some parts of Syria again after Assad fell. They've taken some parts of Lebanon. They're going to keep. I've just seen the map of Greater Israel being posed by Netanyahu, that has been shown by Netanyahu on the Israeli government. It includes many of these places that Tucker just talked about. So yes, they do believe that they have the right to all of the Middle East, all of the Levant. And Mike Cuckabee just confirmed it would be fine if they took it all.
But I don't think that's what we're talking about here today.
What would be fine? Well, it's exactly what we're talking about today.
But here's what I don't think
you think it would be fine if the state of Israel took over all of Jordan?
They don't want to take it over. They're not.
But why not? If God gave them all the land, why not take everything?
Asking to take it over.
But you're saying that the reason that Israel is legitimate, has this inherent right to exist, is in part because God gave it to his people. And I am going to the same Bible that you're referring to and noticing that that is a huge piece of land. So if God gave them that land, then they have a right to take it now by your definition, unless I'm missing something completely.
Well, I think you're missing something, because they're not asking to go back to take all of that, but they are asking to at least take the land that they now occupy, they now live in, they now own legitimately, and it is a safe haven for them.
Well, but may I ask though, because you're explaining what Christian Zionism is and your theological beliefs. And you think you just said it would be fine with you if the state of Israel took all of Jordan, all of Syria, all of Lebanon.
That's really not exactly what I'm trying to say.
I'm asking,
Tucker.
Is that what you said? I thought that's what you just said.
It was somewhat of a hyperbolic statement in that, if that's what you feel like that we're talking about, but it isn't. We're talking about this land that Israel, the state of Israel, now lives in and wants to have peace in. They're not trying to take over Jordan. They're not trying to take over Syria. They're not trying to take over Iraq or anywhere else. But they do want to protect Lebanon? Their people. No, they're not trying to take over Lebanon.
But you're saying that as a religious man, as a Christian Zionist, you agree with a lot of religious communities here in Israel that the justification for this country is theological. It's a contract between God and his people. And I'm telling you that contract includes a tract of land that is much larger than the current nation state.
So you may be a bigger Zionist than even the Jews are that live in Israel.
I'm trying to understand the implications of your theology for geopolitics, because you're saying that the present government of Israel has a moral right to take over what are now other people's countries.
No, I didn't say that.
Then what are you saying?
I'm simply saying that the people who live in Israel, I think, have a right to have security, have safety. They have a right to be able to live in this land that they have a connection to for 30 years.
I told myself when I said a prayer that I would not get annoyed, but as someone who is, the father of daughters, when I see child molesters hiding in Israel and escaping American justice, I think I have a right to safety in my country too. So you can understand that I think most people feel they have a right to safety. I do think Israel has a right to safety, and I hope that for them. And I'm sincere, but I'm an American and I have a right to safety in my country.
Show me your steez. Show me your composure. Show me your steez. Show me your composure.
Country too.
Of course you do.
Agree? And I think so, but I just want to get to this point. If
you are invoking religion as the basis for the existence of Israel, then you have to go all in. You cannot take half measures. You can't take half measures. I mean, that's literally what happened when God told King Saul to kill the Amalekites. He said, kill everything, men, women, children, animals, everything. And then Saul went and spared the sheep and the cattle and said he wants to use it to sacrifice to God. And what did the prophet Samuel tell him? 1 Samuel 15:22, obedience is better than sacrifice. So what is Israel trying to do here? If this is a religious injunction, then you are flouting God's command. If God has said, I've given you this land from the Nile to the Euphrates, and you're saying, oh no, we just want this little one, you're flouting a religious command, isn't it? But you see, the thing about Israel as it is, it's a chameleon. At times they use everything to justify their existence or whatever. They will use religion, they will use politics, they'll use ethnicity. So at times, Jewish identity is based on politics. At other times, it's based on ethnicity. At other times, it's based on religion. As Tucker would go on to ask later on, someone who is an ethnic Jew but converts to Christianity somehow loses their Jewishness. If it's an ethnicity, why does it? How do you lose your ethnic identity by converting to another religion? How does that happen? But then you say it's an ethnic identity, but someone of another ethnicity who converts to Judaism now has that right. So which is it? Is it a religion? Is it an ethnicity based on lineal descent? Which is it?
Israel were to say, God gave us in Genesis 15 all of Lebanon, all of Syria, all the way up to Iraq, would that be legitimate in your view?
I don't think in this particular day and time they're asking for it.
Would it be legitimate?
I'm not sure that it would be.
Why?
Why? Exactly. Why? Because you certainly think it's legitimate now for them to claim a part of that land by saying God gave it to us. So what if they were to say that God gave us all of Lebanon and Syria and Jordan? Why wouldn't it be legitimate? Why are you drawing arbitrary?
Because you just said that God gave it to them.
Because I think that there is an understanding that the people of Israel today, now if they end up getting attacked by all these places and they win that war and they take that land, then okay, that's a whole nother discussion.
So you're saying that by force, it's legitimate to acquire land by force. Isn't that what Hamas is trying to do? To get what they want by force. So do you think it is okay for Hamas to wipe out the Israelis by force, by military force? That if they are able to do that, then they become the legitimate owners of the land? Is that what you're saying? Or this only applies to Israel? It doesn't apply the other way around. These guys are not consistent with their logic. They're not consistent with their principles. They apply it very, very selectively.
But you and I started out. We started
okay?
talking about something simple: Christian Zionism.
But it turns out it's not simple because the core of Christian Zionism, you said, and I'm quoting you, is the understanding, the belief, the theological understanding that Jews have a moral and legal. We went through the legal,
biblical,
moral deriving from the biblical, from the promises in our Bible, which we share with the Jewish people, the first part of it, the Old Testament, that it derives from God's promise to the Jews. And so I have two questions. What are the borders of that? And who are those people in 2026? And you're not the first person I've asked, but you're the most reasonable, most gentle, most theologically informed person. So I'm really hoping for an answer.
Yeah.
The first question was the borders. I can't get an answer.
Yeah.
Those borders are. So I'm going to give up. But the second question is every bit as pressing, which is who are the people? Who are the modern? Yes. Who are the descendants? So we know, and I believe, and I agree with you as a Christian, that God promised this land from modern day Iraq to modern day Egypt to this people, the Jews, to Abram's, actually not to Abram's descendants, as it says in Genesis 15. Who are his descendants now, and how do we know who they are?
I think they're the Jews, and we know who they are because they've always been a Jewish people. there has been an unbroken line of Jewish people, and they've lived in this land for 3,800 years. Sometimes not very many of them, because they were chased out all over the world. They were hunted down. They were almost annihilated during the Holocaust. They came back. To this day, Tucker, they represent, you know how many Jews there are in the whole world?
Please,
No,
I understand. But first of all, the greatest genocide of Jews no one ever mentions was by the Romans, where they were literally banned from Jerusalem for 500 years.
Yeah, of course.
And it's all awful. And I'm opposed to all of that. I'm opposed to mass killing of anybody, period. I'm opposed to
hear
killing.
you say that.
I mean it.
Yeah.
And I hope
I
we can
believe
agree
that.
on that.
I believe that.
My question is, and it's not a bumper sticker answer, it's a sincere answer. How do we know? Because what you're saying is that certain people have a title to a highly contested region. They own it in some deep sense. So I think it's fair to ask, who are they and how do we know? So the current prime minister's ancestors weren't from here within recorded history. He has no deed. Bibi Netanyahu, on one side, his family's from Poland. They're from Eastern Europe.
Very, very good point. Very, very good point. So, like I said earlier, there is absolutely no contesting the fact that there've always been Jewish people on that land. That's not the point. The point is people coming from Europe, people coming from North Africa, people coming from other parts of the world who are religious Jews. That's the best you can validate their Jewishness in a religious sense. Even before the Romans destroyed the Second Temple and exiled many Jewish people from the land. Not all of them, obviously. It's never a complete exile. They've always been a robust, thriving Jewish diaspora in the Bible during the time of Jesus Christ. And these people were religious Jews. They were not ethnic Jews. Look at what happened during the Pentecost. There were Jews from Arabia. There were Jews from Cappadocia. There were Jews from different parts of the world who came to Jerusalem for pilgrimage. And then they heard the disciples speaking in their own tongues. So these people did not even speak Hebrew. They didn't speak Hebrew because they were not Hebrew people. They were Jews from other parts of the world, from Egypt, from just name it. You can go back and read that in Acts chapter 2 and see all this for yourself. And they were amazed how these Galileans were speaking their own mother tongue, Phrygians, Scythians. They were amazed. Judaism has, for a very long time, always been a religion, not an ethnic identity. Yes, there was some ethnic component to it, but even at the time of Jesus Christ, it wasn't ethnicity, it was already a religion. And then thousands of years later, when that religion has spread to Europe and other parts of the world, you expect us to believe that there is some sort of lineal descent. Even if that were the case, at what point do you stop being a particular thing? I mean, many Americans are descended from people from Europe and Africa, right? Do you think African Americans have a right to Africa today? Even though clearly it is indisputable that their ancestors were from Africa, do you think that African Americans can go back to a place in Africa today and say, this is where our ancestors were from, every person here get the hell out? Of course, Africans recognize that your ancestors are taken away from here. It doesn't give you the right to the land. Many European or many white Americans are from England, from Germany. Do you think that they have a right to go back to England and Germany today? It is uncontested, very, very uncontested. Many of these people can trace their lineage to England or Germany or some other parts of Europe. Do you think that they can go en masse to England today and displace the local inhabitants and tell them that our ancestors came from here, so everybody get the hell out? You think anybody will respect that claim? But somehow for Jewish people in Europe, we're supposed to magically accept that. Being absent for the land for 2,000 years. You expect Palestinians whose ancestors were there 70 years ago, whose ancestors were chased away 70 years ago, you expect them to give up their right to the land while you did not give up your right to the land for 2,000 years. Isn't that insane? For 2,000 years, you could not give up your land, but you expect the Palestinians to give up their land in 70 years, and you think they're insane for trying to get back their land.
So how do we know that he has a connection to the people who God promised the land to, Abram's descendants? How do we know that?
Well, if you take the genealogies that come not only from the Old, but the New Testament, you see that there is a historical connection through the entirety of the Old and the New Testament that details the Jewish connection to this land.
Does that include Bibi's family? How do we know that if his family
they were
comes here,
scattered?
But how do we know it's the same people? Why is that crazy? If you say to me,
if they speak the same language, if they worship the same God, if they follow the same Bible, if they follow the same cultures and traditions, and they always pray next year in Jerusalem, and they pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and they pray facing toward Jerusalem, does that not give you a little bit of a clue as to who they are?
Let's go through
No. Because you know what? Different people can take on. Jews haven't always spoken the same language. Hebrew was just invented in 20th century or late 19th century. Even at the time of Jesus Christ, Jesus did not speak Hebrew. He spoke Aramaic. And most Jews, for most part of their history, did not speak Hebrew. The Jews from Europe did not speak Hebrew. They didn't speak Hebrew. They spoke a Germanic language. I'm trying to remember the name of that language that they spoke, which was a mix of Hebrew and German, right? They didn't speak Hebrew. So in that sense, the only thing that tied them together, Jews did not have one culture. The cultures varied depending on the regions that they were in. The cultural practices of Jews from Morocco or from the Middle East was certainly different from those in the Middle East, in Europe, in North Africa. They were all different. They didn't have the same dress. They didn't speak the same language. They don't even look the same. If you look at Jews from all over the world, legitimate by the way, they're Ethiopian Jews, for crying out loud. Black-skinned, like me, black-skinned Ethiopian Jews. And they are Kaifeng Jews that look Chinese. They are Beni Israel from India that look Indian. They are Ashkenazi Jews that look European. They are Mizrahi Jews that look Arab. And these are all legitimate Jewish identities because it's a religious identity, not an ethnic one. So even if you want to say based on descent, even if there was somewhere down the line, there was one Jewish ancestor to, all of these people, do you think African Americans are Europeans based on the fact that most African Americans have some form of European ancestry? Would anyone consider African Americans Europeans? And I bet you that many African Americans have a higher percentage of European ancestry than Jews from other parts of the world have of ancient Jewish ancestry. But somehow they're still considered Jews. So what's all this mix up?
Those things, because I would like to have a rational. This is a conversation I've wanted. Bless you. Thank you for doing this. Let's just go through those things.
Okay.
So one of the things I admire most about Israel is they resurrected a dead language in 1948. Good for them.
Well, they really didn't resurrect it. It was existent.
Okay, I'm not. That's not. That's a compliment. I'm not slighting.
No. But it is the first time in all of human history that a language has survived through this length of time. It's. I would call it. You might not, but I would call it a miracle. One of many.
Okay,
that you can attribute to this.
I think it's wonderful as someone who loves language. Netanyahu's parents did not speak Hebrew. Okay, they didn't live in this region. Netanyahu, the founders of this country, were mostly secular. Some of them were avowed atheists. They were not praying for the peace of Jerusalem. They weren't praying at all because they didn't believe in God. There's no genealogy linking their families to the people of this land 3,000 years ago. They're not. So how do we know, since they didn't share a language, they didn't share a religion, they had no religion whatsoever, how do we know that they had a right to come here from Eastern Europe and
but they were scattered.
Take the land?
They were scattered to Eastern Europe. They were scattered all over the world. There were many in Ethiopia. They were in Russia. They were in Poland. they were throughout Asia. Jews were all over the place, but they were
that.
still Jews.
But
they were still Jews.
Okay,
That's
so then
what
let
made
me
them
get to the
unique.
nub of the question, since again, a lot is at stake, a lot of money is at stake. Land is very valuable. Israel has a lot of resources. By the way, if you're accused of a crime, you can hide here. That's a pretty good passport to have. It's a good thing, right? So who's entitled to it? I don't understand, and you're very discouraged in the United States from asking this question for some reason. It's a totally rational
I'm not
question.
discouraged.
No, you're not discouraging.
Yeah.
Me. Others do. You're like the only person I can have this conversation with. Everyone will be like, shut up, Nazi. It's a foundational question. Are you speaking of an ethnic group or a religious group?
Well, I think you're looking
They use it, they use the ethnic sense conveniently when it fits their narrative. They use the religious sense conveniently when it fits their narrative.
at, for many people, it is religious. There are people who may not have a deep religious connection to Judaism, but they're still Jews.
Okay, so it's an ethnic category.
It is ethnic, but it is also religious. It is rooted in religion. You can't take it out of it. Now, that means
then
there are
how
some people,
can an atheist?
Well, I will tell you this. There are some people who say, I'm Christian. They never go to church. They never pray.
Yeah, but they never said they are atheists. They might be lukewarm Christians, but they never said they were atheists, that they don't believe in God. Most of the founders of Israel were atheists, people who don't believe in a God, yet somehow they believe that God gave them a land. How does that work? How does that track? You can have a Christian that is not really a practicing Christian, but he knows, he knows that I should probably be practicing more. I believe in God, but maybe, I don't go to church. I'm not a very moral person, and so on and so forth. He doesn't deny the existence of God. But that wasn't the case with the Zionist founders of Israel, Herzl, and what have you. These were secular people who didn't believe in God one bit. So it wasn't as if they were religious in a sense, but they were not really practicing.
Pray. They never read their Bible. They don't tithe.
But they're not entitled to citizenship on the basis of that.
Well,
they're
but
not
I'm saying
entitled
that
to.
they still call themselves Christian,
Of course.
even though they identify in that way.
Here's the difference. You're saying that people who have this identification have a deed to a huge chunk of land on the Mediterranean. Okay, so there's, it's a right. You keep telling me it's a right, and so it's totally fair to say if you come to my house and say I've got the title to your house, I get to ask, may I see it? Where'd you get it? And that's exactly what happened here. People from Europe, Eastern Europe, came here, in a lot of cases atheists, and kicked out a lot of people who lived here.
Land.
Well, but
they did not just throw people out.
They bought a lot of land. There's no question about that.
They did buy a lot of land.
But they
The
also
whole
in
idea of Zionist
1948
movement
kicked out.
But you know what? Anybody can buy land anywhere. Let me go back to the African American, analogy. African Americans can come to Africa and buy land wherever. Nobody's going to stop them. You can buy land anywhere. But the moment those people who are buying land begin to say, you know what, we want to create a country exclusive to us, you're going to have big problems. You're going to have massive problems. I'm sure the Chinese are buying land in the US. I'm sure the US has land in some other country. But supposing a huge part of the land that the Chinese have bought in a part of the US, they now decide to say, well, because we now own most of this land, we're going to create a China, independent China here. It's a legal country. We have the right to tell other Americans living there to get the hell out. Do you think that anybody's going to agree to that? So for the fact that they bought land does not give them the right to create a country on that land.
A lot of people
in the war.
Oh, it was a war. I agree.
Yeah.
I'm not want to relitigate the history. I'm just saying it's a fact.
Okay.
Including a lot of Christians wound up fleeing, and they lost their homes, and they've never been allowed back. And all of this was justified on the basis of this identity that is the ticket to the right that you keep referring to. So my question is very simple. I'm going to wait patiently for an answer. Does this right derive from religious affiliation or from genetics?
And I would say it's both. But I would also say that when you said the Christians were kicked out, Tucker, Christianity is growing in Israel.
Okay, but
and there is a big lie that goes out there. But no, let me finish this, because I keep hearing that Christians are really not treated well in Israel. That's just that's a lie.
Well, there are lots of different.
A lie.
There are lots of different.
There were 34,000 Christians in Israel in 1948. There are 184,000 Christians here today.
And by Israel, what are you counting?
You talking about the land?
What territory are you counting? You're counting about Israel proper? Or are you counting
about Israel
the West
proper?
Bank as well and Gaza? I mean, what do you, when you say Israel, those numbers apply to what landmass?
It would be in Israel proper.
Okay.
There are 184,000. Now, I'll tell you where Christians are not doing very well. They're not doing very well in the Muslim-controlled countries. There's almost no Christians in Qatar, for example, except those who live in the Christian ghetto, who are the service workers.
I'm sorry. Look, I don't want to argue with you. There are many more Christians in Qatar than there are in Israel.
That's not true.
It actually is true. And I refer you to Wikipedia, Mr. Ambassador.
Wikipedia.
I refer you to the government of Qatar, the government of Israel. These are knowable facts.
And Tucker is right. There are many more Christians in Qatar, a Muslim country, than in Israel. Besides, Israel is literally the birthplace of Christianity. There are about 180,000 Christians in Israel, in a country of about 10 million people. Just 180,000 of them are Christians. Something is not right. Qatar has upwards of 300 to 400,000 Christians. And I want to bet that Qatar is a much smaller country than Israel. So what's going on there? If Israel was so open to Christians, I think there'd be a lot more Christians in Israel than they are. So a population of 10 million people, I just have 180,000 of them in the land where Christianity was born.
Like I'm in
Jordan. By the way, numbers are down. In Syria, the numbers are down. In Lebanon, the numbers are down. I'm just telling you that
about twice as many Christians,
but they live.
No, so this is not to say that Christians are having a swell time in Muslim countries. No, they're being persecuted in Muslim countries. But we're talking about Israel now, so this whataboutism really doesn't make any sense. Israel is a typical Middle Eastern country. It's an ethno-religious state, just as you have in other Middle Eastern countries. Saudi Arabia is an Arab ethno-nationalist state, ethno-religious state. Many of those countries, they're that, and Israel is no exception. But it wants to put itself like it's the exception, it's the secular country. No, you don't get a secular country where the number of Christians there are like 180,000.
Live in the enclave. They are not native Qataris.
Okay, we're mixing so many different categories here.
Anyway, this is a very long interview. It's going to go on and on and on, which I really don't have the time for at this point. But I think I've really made my points known in all of this. I think Tucker did a very good job in holding Huckabee's feet to the fire. Cuckabee did a lot of bob and weave. He did a lot of dodging, but many of these things were revealed in the end. All these claims, this false. I don't think there is a much more fraudulent identity than the identity that Israelis have used to steal land from Palestinians, and it's just crazy. Just because they're Muslim doesn't mean that they're wrong. It doesn't mean that I have my own gripes with Islam, but just because they're Muslim doesn't mean they're wrong. In this case, I think they are the ones that are being wronged. And as a good Christian, I think I would advocate for the rights of anybody, Christian, Jew, Muslim, anyone, as long as you're a human being and you're being oppressed, I would always advocate and fight for your rights. And I think that's something that these so-called Christian Zionists need to learn. So that's it for today. Like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in another live stream. It's bye for now.